Good afternoon. Welcome to today's philosophical discussion entitled On Music, Narrative, and Violence, reading Haruki Murakami from Kobe and Manila, presented and organized by Professor K.C. Abalos-Orendain's Philosophy in and of Popular Culture class from the Philosophy Department of University of the Philippines, Diliman, in coordination with Professor Kazashi Nobuo from Kobe University.
I am Reina Sebastian from UP Diliman.
And I am Renzo Ramos from UP Diliman, and we will be your host for today. We hope that you're all excited as we are for the lecture and commentary prepared for us today by Professor Kazashi and Ma'am Casey.
So some of our participants today are from Kobe University, as well as the University of Economics from Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam, and majority are from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. So initially, we only planned the event to be an intimate discussion between students from Kobe and UP, Diliman, since these are the schools that our speakers are from. But thanks to your overwhelming support and interest for the event, we are now joined by a diverse audience from casual fans of Murakami to students who are currently studying their undergrad, their masterals, even their doctorates, coming from Japan, Nanzan University, and Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University, and also many students from the Philippines coming from PUP, PNU, from Ateneo, LaSalle, and even to other UP campuses, UP Tacloban. As we can see in our participant count, there are too many to mention. So please feel free to introduce yourselves in the Zoom chat if you're comfortable, your name, where you're from, your affiliation if you're comfortable, and also to make the atmosphere warmer. We would also like to ask those who are comfortable to show their faces to open their cameras so our speakers can see your reactions to their lectures later on when they do their lectures.
While we do that, here's a bit of background on our partner university to get this ball rolling. Kobe University was formally established in Western Japan in 1949, initially known as the Kobe Higher Commercial School, dating back in 1902. While working in spirit of integrity, freedom, and cooperation in keeping with its open and cosmopolitan culture and environs, it aims to contribute to the global community through the creation of knowledge founded on universal values and the fostering of rich understanding and strong leadership skills. Affectionately known as the Sindai, it sits up top, Mount Roko, where it overlooks the Kobe Harbor. Kobe University, true to its city, continues to welcome foreign students from all over the world. It's no wonder Murakami wrote about his collection of short stories after the quake. Did you know, Reina, that Haruki himself grew up in Kobe?
Hajime. Really, I didn't actually know. I read a lot of his works when I was a teenager, so it's a few years back and the details are fuzzy. I did not actually know that he was from Kobe. And as we all know from the title of our event, the man of the hour for today's discussion is none other than Haruki Murakami, whose works unify us right now in our endeavor to deepen our understanding and analysis of his works. We tried to set the mood with the song that has been playing right now in the background since the start of the event. This is actually Schubert's Piano Sonata in D major. It is a song that is integrated within Murakami's novel Kafka on the Shore. Actually, when you go to YouTube and search this, Schubert's Piano Sonata in D major, the comment section is just filled with people who were brought to that music just because they were reading Kafka on the Shore.
This song was mentioned by the character Oshima, right?
Yes. From what I remember, since it's also a few years back since I read Kafka on the Shore, Oshima is an integral character in Kafka on the Shore, and his story allows for the exploration of gender identity, also the relationship between one's body and identity. I won't spoil much, but the quotation comes from chapter 13, I think, of Kafka on the Shore, and it goes like this, quote, "But listening to the D major, I can feel the limits of what humans are capable of, that a certain type of perfection can only be realized through a limitless accumulation of the imperfect," unquote. So our resources can actually be found in Murakami's website, the list of songs that are used in his novels. It is quite interesting to see just how much music is present in what is supposedly a soundless medium that is the novel.
That's pretty interesting. Well, we may consume certain media for our entertainment, but upon digging deeper into their main themes, we may get a certain grasp of their philosophical ideas present in such media and even relate them to our everyday and societal structures. Big questions may arise from media that warrants philosophers and even students who study philosophy to discuss such questions like, why is this, or what is the foundations of this belief, perhaps. We hope that today's event will successfully provide an avenue of discussion and analysis today.
So I think while we were chatting and starting to get the ball rolling, people are now, mostly of our participants have entered the room, and many of us have introduced ourselves to each other. So hello from the students from Bicol University, from St. Louis University, Baguio City, from PNU, Manila, from LaSalle, Dasmariñas. Good afternoon to everyone. So I am sure that many of us here are fans of his work and are familiar with how much music and violence actually is in Murakami's works, and are very excited to know more about the world building that is in his works. Your very presence today, we would like to thank you for your presence because it is testament to the immense interest and following around the works of Murakami. So with that, let us hear from Professor Casey Abalos-Orendain for the opening remarks and perhaps a bit of introductory information for our participants whose first encounter with Murakami might be today's event.
Everyone, let's give a virtual round of applause for our Professor Casey Abalos-Orendain.
Hey.
Thank you, Renzo and Raina. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We are so excited. Minasan konnichiwa to all our friends from Kobe University and other parts of Japan. Sashiburi. To all our friends from all over the world and from all over the Philippines, we welcome you. We were all surprised. My Philosophy 198 class and I were surprised at the warm response we received from everyone. We didn't expect there to be so many people interested. Apparently, Murakami is very popular. Who would have thunk? Well, we all know that he is. And this is a testament to that. Let me just say first and foremost that I'm very proud of this class. They did such a great job of organizing all this. So thank you guys. And I will thank you again before we end. But good job so far. And all semester, my class and I have been discussing the philosophical possibilities of and within pop culture. So when my thesis advisor, Professor Kazashi Nobuo, and my favorite sensei said he might be available for a special lecture on Haruki Murakami, I jumped at the chance to share this with my smart and feisty students. But now, just like any pop culture phenomenon, it has grown into this international event, proving once again that we turn to the arts, we turn to our narratives for comfort, for fun, to learn, and to know more about ourselves and each other. I hope that this will just be the first of many of these events. So I will actually give the mic again to Raina and Renzo for a very brief introduction of our speaker this afternoon. But I just want to say ahead of time that thank you, Kazashi Sensei, for gracing us with your presence, for sharing your thoughts once again. And I hope that our audience will also participate and engage with us through their questions, through their comments in the chat box, so that we can have a very interactive exchange this afternoon. Welcome everyone once again, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Casey, for that. It's very true. Even in this COVID-19 situation and all the events going around the world, it's these arts that bring us comfort into our present lives and situations. Anyways, before we introduce our main speaker, here is a quick overview of the program. The main lecture, provided by Professor Kazashi, will be followed immediately by a commentary from Ma'am Casey, with the question and answer portion finally being at the last segment of the program.
With that said, we would just like to reiterate that the Zoom chat is open for your comments, but please keep your questions on a piece of paper since we would only be entertaining questions during the Q&A portion. And we would also like to encourage participants who are comfortable with opening their cameras to open your camera and show your faces to our lecturers, as seeing your face and reaction would really warm up the atmosphere. As such, we advise people again to take notes and just, ask the questions later on. And without further ado, we will now introduce our main speaker. Professor Emeritus Kazashi Nobuo is a professor at Kobe University and currently a visiting professor from Dalian University of Technology since 2019. He received his doctorate from Yale University in 1993 under the Fulbright Scholarship. He co-founded the American Philosophy Forum in Japan, and he now resides in Hiroshima and is active in the nuclear disarmament movement. He co-directed the World Nuclear Victims Forums held in Hiroshima in November of 2015. His research specializations include contemporary philosophy, modern Japanese thought, and peace studies.
His publications in English include La Passion for Philosophy in a Post-Hiroshima Age, Rethinking Nishida's Philosophy of History, Bodily Logos, James, Nishida, and Merleau-Ponty, and The Musicality of the Other, Schutz, Merleau-Ponty, and Kimura.
We also sent the publications in English in the chat in case you guys are interested in reading them. While his publications in Japanese include For a Nuclear Free World, The Unending Iraq War, Questioning Anew from Fukushima, Nishida's Philosophy of History, The Century of Philosophy, First Steps from Hiroshima. We would also be sending the titles in the group chat so you can search for them afterwards if you are interested in reading them. Finally, Professor Emeritus Kazashi Nobuo is a recipient of the sixth William James Prize for the best paper submitted by junior scholars from the American Philosophical Association in 1991 and a Practice Award from the Japanese Society for Science and Technology Studies in 2012. Now, without further ado, let us give a round of virtual applause for our speaker, Professor Emeritus Kazashi Nobuo.
Thank you very much. I'm really delighted and honored to be able to talk to you today. And special thanks to the student team preparing for this occasion. And I have been already deeply impressed with the preparations you have done, and including the wonderful poster. And also I'd like to extend my thank to Professor K.C. Abalos-Orendain, and let me call her simply KC from now on. That's the way we used to, and we are calling her. And as for the poster, now you are seeing now the fan of Murakami Haruki may, I guess, have already noticed the very significant sort of implications, indications, sort of hidden in the poster, and the stairs going down, so the intimating the leading to the world of underground and unconscious. So, and I'm really impressed with this poster too. And so I also for the very wonderful introductions and including some introduction of the Kobe University too. I'm really impressed. And now, and I hope are you seeing my Do you see, are you seeing my PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go, let's start. Hmm? So outline of the talk today is like this. First, Kobe and Murakami Haruki. And Murakami Haruki was born in Kyoto, but moved to Kobe when he was very small. And he went to a high school in Kobe. And after that, he went on to a Waseda University in Tokyo, as you may know. And so actually, today's talk will be focused mainly on this part of first section, which is quite complicated. And especially the kind of books he read when he was young, and also the relationship he had with parents, especially with father, and which was very quite complicated and difficult ones, and the Murakami Haruki has written quite a number of essays actually published, and some of them have been translated into English, but many others remain untranslated today. So, but in some of these essays, Murakami Haruki has written quite many times, actually, about the kind of relationship he had with his father, and which is a very central theme for him. And recently, and he is beginning to talk about this topic more and more clearly. So I will focus on this aspect, and in order to look at his literary work from a bit different way. And I'm not sure to what extent I can cover today, but what I have in mind is the going through the overall trajectory as a novelist, and the time he spent in Europe, USA, and coming back to Japan. And the turning point for his career was 1995. And the two very serious incidents occurred. One is a big earthquake in Kobe, and another is the so-called Tokyo Southern Sarin attack committed by a new religious cult called Om Shinrikyo. And this was around this time that the theme of violence and war started conspicuous, very clear, and in his works, in his long stories, right? And but actually, when we look at his early works, and actually we can notice that these themes were already there in a very latent and implicit ways. And lastly, what I have in mind is the part 4, some critical questions. And this course is for philosophy I think, in and of popular culture. And so I thought of the relationship between philosophy and narrative, and the kind of sort of things Murakami Haruki has written about narrative. And I have some questions about the way he has been sort of writing in relation to the narratives, and especially in reference to the violence, and especially in contemporary Japan. And so for this last part, I wanted to make a relationship, make reference to, for example, Dostoevsky, um, whom Murakami Haruki admires, as you know. But I'm afraid we will not have enough time for this. And I talked with Casey, but so if it is possible, we can have a sort of additional time for those willing to have discussion on this part. But anyway, let me try to focus on the section 1 today. So and at first Kobe, and the Renzo kindly makes some introduction of the Kobe and Kobe University. And this is the Kobe is just located at the middle of Japan, right? And quite close to Kyoto and Osaka. And this is a kind of views you may have of Kobe. Kobe at night, and Kobe is very close to the so-called Mount Rokko Mountains. So it is sort of sandwiched between the sea and the mountains. And so Kobe was one of the Japanese harbors opened to the West. So it has been it is considered one of the cosmopolitan cities in Japan. And this is a Kobe University view, and the lower one, it may be a bit difficult for you to understand what it is, but this is a kind of view, and if you visit the campus, you can enjoy. And there's a big sort of a terrace-like place where students can gather and have the view of the Kobe port. And so, because Kobe is a port city opened to the West quite early on, and it has a quite special sort of position and relationship with the West. For example, just to mention only two well-known cases. One is a philosopher, Watsuji Tetsuro, and nowadays, because of the COVID-19, we cannot move, we cannot fly around. But generally, before the COVID-19, we used to move around easily, right? But here around after the war. And when Japanese scholars, artists, intellectuals, when they went to Europe, usually it was from Kobe port that they departed. And also they came back from Europe to the Kobe port. So, and the Watsuji Tetsuro philosopher also left Kobe port when he went to Europe by ship. By ship, I should have said by ship, not airplanes, by ship. So it took them many days, couple of months, right? So that means Watsuji Tetsuro, when he went on to Europe, when, for example, Heidegger was very quite young, but getting know. And the Watsuji Tetsuro took a ship, and on his way to Europe, he visited many harbors, port cities like Shanghai, Singapore, and Mumbai, and these. So what Watsuji came to notice the difference in climate, in a natural environment. So he ended up writing one of his most well-known books, Fudo, Climate and Culture, in 1935. Immediately after coming back from Europe and reading Heidegger's Being and Time. And this is a sort of a critique of Heidegger's sort of a concentration on the importance of temporality. But let's leave it aside today, and let's go on to Kato Ishiichi. Kato Ishiichi went to France, Europe, after the war. And he came back to Japan, and it was a ship trip back. So Kato Ishiichi also visited many ports in Europe, for example, Marseille and Egypt and Singapore and Shanghai and Kobe. And in his case, Kato came to notice. He says when he was staying in France as a doctor and a scholar interested in literature, Kato's framework was a contrast between Japan and Europe. But when he came back by ship, he came to notice the very interesting differences among the various harbor cities in Asia. In a sense, every culture, every city is a hybrid product. Singapore is a hybrid product. Shanghai is a hybrid product. Kobe too. But Kato sensed the differences, and so he came to think about where these differences in hybridity in culture came from. So that was his start, and he wrote a book called Hybrid Culture, Japan's Little Hope. And this means during the wartime, there was a very crazy Japan centrist, ideology. Japan is a very special country, very unique and homogeneous, right? And so the notion of being hybrid, did not have a positive value during the war. But actually, Kato Ishiichi visiting Europe and coming back, visiting various cities in Asia, he became aware of the fact that Japanese culture is a hybrid culture. And actually, this is not only a fact, but it has a very positive possibility and hope in terms of creating new culture and a new contribution. And when Kato wrote about hybrid culture, it did not mean that, if you go to Japan, you can enjoy all sorts of ethnic, hybrid cultures and food and Chinese food or Indian food, everything mixed up, music is mixed up. But actually, Kato also thought about the root of hybrid culture and the possibility, a philosophical possibility of hybrid culture, such as Japan's post-war peace constitution as a product of hybrid culture. So in this sense, I would like to point out the very special position of Kobe has in the modern Japanese culture and intellectual sort of exchange with the West. And I'd like to put Murakami Haruki in this context too. And one of the reasons I'm talking today about Murakami Haruki is when I was teaching at Kobe, and I used to teach a class for foreign students in English about the sort of cultural and intellectual relationship between Japan and the West and Asia, including China. But when I took up Murakami Haruki's text, I felt there are differences in the way Murakami Haruki is being read around the world. The kind of image I had about his literature was quite different from what foreign students talked about in class. So I started to wonder why. And of course, the difference is a natural and positive thing. I simply started to wonder why. And I started to read more related works and essays by Murakami Haruki. And what I got is what I'm going to talk today. And I'd like to share with you today what I find most interesting and very sort of stimulating in his career and work, and the way his work is related to not only American contemporary literature, but also to the Chinese tradition, also Japanese tradition, and also what's happening in contemporary world. And so, with that purpose in mind, let's move on. And at first, Murakami Haruki spent his high school days in Kobe and Kobe High School, which is quite close to Kobe University. And the area is the area he used to live is known as a area close to a very cosmopolitan area, and very interesting stories. Only one is, for example, Tanizaki Junichiro. He is one of master works, Makioka Sisters. He has a lot to do with this area, Asia area. But now Murakami's young days, one thing, he read lots and lots of books. This is an expression, as if throwing books into a burning stove with a shovel. And this is a very, vehement, passionate expression, the way he read books, just like throwing them in a burning stove with a shovel, and one after another. And of course, the encounter with music, and Renzo gave a very wonderful introduction about his passion for music. But I'd like to, bring into light the third point, shadows of the past, by way of his father and the presence of China, the war in China, and so let go into a detail, and let me read some sentences in his own words, in his expression. For example, there's a collection of essays, A Novelist as a Vocation, not translated into English yet, but it contains a very revealing sort of recollections about his younger days. For example, he writes, sorry, I have a difficulty with the screen and yeah. So, for example, there's a section entitled About School, and he writes that he did not like going to school, but he loved reading books. So this is a quote, and the translation is my tentative one. I started to read English novels in the original from the middle of my high school years. It is not that I was particularly good at English, but I felt the urge to read them in the original or the novels, not translated into Japanese yet. So I think some of his fans know well his sort of love for contemporary American novels. So this is, I think, the image you may already have that he's very familiar with American literature, English literature, and this is a sentence I quoted. So as for books, I went to reading truly various kinds of books voraciously one after another, just like throwing them into a blazing furnace, you know, burning white, a very violent, expression, strong expression. I think it was very significant for me that in my teenage, my perspective became in a natural way relativized through reading various kinds of books. It means experiencing the various emotions depicted in the books almost like my own, going back and forth in imagination, freely through time and space, seeing various strange sceneries, letting various words pass through my body. My viewpoints became more or less complex. And, this is a very straightforward and clear sort of a sentences, and very impressive, I think. And it shows the sort of openness, deceptive sort of openness, and in some other place, he writes like something like, for example, regarding the sort of relationship with other people, he writes that he does not make a quick judgment. This person is really, or I don't like this person, or simply most of the time he says he can take sort of a, at first, observing attitude, opening himself to other different personalities and the behaviors. And so I think the way he read books has something to do with his own sort of attitude toward real persons too. And this is what I felt. And another point, and that stands out, is this is about how he started writing fiction. And we will come back of why he started to, and when he wanted to start writing. But now let's look at what he has to say about the relationship between writing and rhythm, writing and music. And so, at first, actually, all of a sudden, I think toward just before he turned 30, he felt the urge to write some fiction, right? And so he wrote it in Japanese at first, but he found it not interesting. So, and what he tried next was to write it in English. And I think in the first paragraph, in the third line in black. So instead, I took out an Olivetti English typewriter. I guess you don't know what Olivetti typewriter is like today, but we are all using the computers. But Olivetti was a very popular typewriter brand. And so it's quite impressive, interesting that he used to own an Olivetti in the first place. And by way of trial, I began writing the novel starting in English, attempting to do something unusual somehow. Of course, my ability to compose in English is limited. I have to write with limited words and limited structures. I got very rough, simple sentences. As went on struggling to write sentences, however, there began to come about something like a rhythm of my own sentences. And so he liked something that came out from writing in English. And then he tried to translate it back into Japanese. And I started to translate the sentences about one chapter length I had just finished in English. And so this is maybe one of the stories his fans are quite familiar with, but still, I think this is very important starting point, isn't it? And so he writes at the bottom. Then I thought, I see, I can write Japanese this way, after writing in English. It was just an eye-opening aha experience. So this is a very essential sentences. When I was writing the novel, I had a feeling of, rather than writing sentences, but something close to performing music. I still cherish that feeling. It may mean, in a word, to write sentences not with mind, but rather with body sensations. To keep rhythm, finding wonderful cause, and believe in the power of impromptu, spontaneous performance. Anyway, facing a kitchen table at midnight when he started to write a fiction in Tokyo for the first time. Writing something like a novel in my own style I just acquired. I was excited as if holding a new craft tool. It was a lot of fun. And in parentheses, I added K. K doesn't mean a Kafka here. K stands for Kazashi. Kazashi's K. This is my addition. This point, I think I'd like to emphasize because when I talked about Murakami Haruki in Japanese to Japanese students in Japan a couple of years ago, I talked about violence or the, very serious political things and relationship with the war in China, for example. And at the very last, a student asked me a question. And well, thank you very much. But she said, I wonder, what kind of joy Murakami Haruki-san has been feeling if he is dealing with such serious themes as violence and the war and history. So I realized I should have emphasized this point at first. that is, writing sentences itself is a great joy for him as a novelist. And that joy comes from the musical, rhythmical character nature of writing sentences, writing. So I think we like to keep this point in mind all through even when we talk about the more serious sort of questions. And the in red part sentence, so he wrote the first novel, short novel, Hear the Wind Sing. And this is the way that first story, fiction, came into being. That is, writing in English and translating it back to Japanese. So naturally, it had a sort of a feeling of a so-called translation novels, you know, the kind of Japanese fictions translated from the English original. And so, and literary critics showed different divided reaction to this sort of a character of his first novel. And some people liked it. Oh, this is a very new feeling, a new writing style. And but others did not like it, and saying that this is simply a very translation thing and nothing more. But some critics sensed something additional, which may have subtle relationship with other literary traditions other than contemporary American writing, and which turns out his sort of a hidden familiarity with Japanese and Chinese literary tradition. And this also has relationship with his father. His father was a teacher. His father was teaching Japanese language and literature at high school, and a very good teacher, and actually a scholar-like person. And before going that, and it's getting time for me to stop. I had better stop, I guess, more or less. But let me try a little more. And this is a very, very characteristic point. And in a word, he writes, being novelist is a very, very physical thing. So let me read the blue part. And to tell a story is, put differently, to go down by yourself, to the lower part of consciousness. It is to descend to the bottom of heart's darkness. And he says this it can be a very dangerous, unexpectable thing for a writer, novelist, to try to go down his or her own unconscious underground. And the last sentence in black, we novelists bring them back without dissecting them. And these packages can sometimes bring about dangerous result. And in order to compete with such powers of the darkness and face various dangers every day because novelist writes every day, it is necessary to have physical strength, no matter what. I've come to feel and understand it little by little through writing novels day after day. And some of you maybe know that Murakami Haruki is a great runner, and he runs almost every day. And even he has participated in a marathon, right? And so actually, he has a very, very unusually stoic lifestyle. And getting up in the 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, almost every day, and writing a few hours. And after that, he goes out to run. And I think he writes about his lifestyle of this kind quite often. And so this may be a rather different image, different from the kind of easygoing and urbane and a very cosmopolitan and the life style depicted, described in his fictions. And I have to skip this quote, but you have there's an English translation for this dialogue. In English, it's entitled "Absolutely on Music: Conversation with Sage Ozawa." And just the couple point, and what I find interesting is that, Sage Ozawa is a very famous conductor, and but actually even about music, and quite often, and Murakami Haruki is no better, and the Ozawa Sage is astonished at this. And Ozawa Sage asks a very simple question like this. For example, in the middle, Ozawa asks, do you think we can feel that kind of rhythm when we read it, when we read sentences? And Murakami respond, yes, the rhythm comes from the combination of words, the combination of the sentences and the paragraphs, the pairings of hard and soft, light and heavy, balance and imbalance, the punctuation, the combination of different tones. Polyrhythm might be the right word for it, as in music. And Ozawa respond, I never knew that there could be rhythm in writing. And so this is a very interesting and frank conversation. You may want to read it. And just one point, and the kind of music, and as Renzo made a wonderful introduction Murakami Haruki is fascinated with various kinds of music, right? Classic and jazz and pop music, and but he seems like has a special liking for Mahler's music, and I find it very revealing in relation to his literary works too. Uh, in Bluepart, in Mahler's music, though, it feels as though he's deliberately plunging down into the dark, into the subterranean, underground realm of the mind. As if in a dream, you find many motifs that contradict one another, that are in opposition, that refuse to blend, and yet are indistinguishable, all joined together almost indiscriminately. So we can notice a very deep sort of uh, internal sort of relationship between uh, music, writing, and the kind of literary world Murakami Haruki has been trying to sort of create. And the regarding Mahler's music, Murakami Haruki something else quite sort of thought provoking. For example, about the kind of sorrow, a feeling of sadness we feel in music, Mahler's music, and the importance of the feeling of sentiment, feeling of sorrow in Japanese literature and culture. But I have to skip it today. And well, yeah, let me try uh, go through this part, and then let's have a short Q&A time. And so relationship with his father and Japanese literature and shadows of the dead in the war. And some of you, I guess, know that both of his parents used to teach Japanese language, literature at actually junior high schools. And especially his father studied at the Kyoto Imperial University during the wartime when he was young. And so his father wanted to be actually a scholar in literature, but he could not make it. And this may be one of the reasons why there was a conflict between them. So the point is, because his parents were teachers of Japanese literature, and Japanese literature was a taken for granted thing at his home. And for example, and his father, encouraged the small Murakami Haruki to read the Japanese classic works, medieval classic works. So Haruki ended up memorizing the text of these classic works, such as the Pillow Book and the Tale of Genji Heike. And actually this tale of the Heike family is actually is used in one of the recent works. And also, actually, this is based on his Murakami Haruki's own recollection. And for example, quite often, conversation at dinner tables at Murakami's family was about Japanese old short poems, tanka, included in the so-called Mayoshu, classical collection of very old poems. And often these old short poems are regarded the resources, perpetual resources for Japanese literary sort of sensibility and imagination. And so I think this is a very important point, isn't it? And, you know, as we looked at actually the kind of sort of impression we get from his, especially his early works, is a very refined, contemporary, and cosmopolitan world, right? And having a very close relationship with especially American fictions. But actually before that, before Murakami Haruki turned to reading American fictions in the original, actually there was this kind of very solid foundation in the Japanese classical literature. And this is quite often taken up in critical works in Japanese. For example, this kind of recollection he makes in a conversation he made with Ryu Murakami, another Ryu, a novelist. Unfortunately, it is not translated yet. And one of the essays written by Ooka Ray.
Hello, good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
Konbanwa. Sorry for the interruption. We will have to wrap up, sir, and move
sure.
on to the commentary.
Yeah. So Ooka Ray, his essay, Japanese language as an obstinate double decker, means that not only Japanese language, but also Murakami Haruki's literary world is not a simple sort of a cosmopolitan American-based world. It is a double decker and has a hidden layer, which is a traditional Japanese literature. But if we think of the fact that this Japanese literature is based often on the Chinese literature, it means not only double decker, but triple decker. So it is, let me round up with this one. Yeah, and this point is also referred to by some critics. That is, especially when we read works like Kafka on the Shore, all of his fans know that one of the characteristics is that dead people or ghosts appear, and they play a very important roles in his literary world, fiction. And actually, there is a tradition of this kind of supernatural tales in Japanese literature, as you may know. And most typically, the most famous one is Ugetsu Monogatari by Ueda Akinari. During the Edo period, the photo is taken from the film adaptation by Mizoguchi Kenji, very famous film. And so the Ugetsu Monogatari, and Ugetsu means tales of moon, light, and rain. And as I wrote, and moon, light, and rain means that there was an old belief that supernatural beings may visit us on a rainy night or with a morning moon. And so this is a symbolic title. And just one closing remark. So not only ghosts appear in these stories, but why they appear. That's a very important point. The inner word. So let me just read the first blue part. Ugetsu Monogatari depicts the misery, the pitiful, the wretchedness, the anger resulting from the wrongdoer-victim relationship in the basic mutuality of living things. At the same time, it confronts a basic problem of evil in man's existence, in his determination to live and in the various realities that surround him. And one of the most well-known story included in Ugetsu Monogatari is about a friendship, and a very close friend becomes imprisoned, although they made a promise that they will meet each other on a certain day, the day of Chrysanthemum. But his friend get imprisoned for some reason. So in order to fulfill his promise to meet his friend, this friend kill himself, and so that he can appear as a ghost in the dream of his friend. So I think some of Murakami's fans find it very, very familiar, right? Right? And let me finish. And what I wanted to regarding the relationship with his father, and it is much more complicated, but let me refer to this as a central difficult point during the Q&A time. And I will stop here. And sorry for being over time, as I was afraid, but thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Kazashi. And I think a lot of things about Haruki's, sorry for that, someone else is in the room. I think a lot of Murakami's novels makes a lot more sense to me right now, especially why Miss Seiki and her ghost is so integral in Kafka on the Shore, especially also the moon in 1Q84. Now I understand why strange things happen when the moon appears because of how supernatural beings visit us in when there's moons. I think also a lot of us can relate to the lyricality of the work. Especially, I think I remember I cried so much when I was only reading the lyrics of Kafa on the Shore, which is, it doesn't have a melody. It's just the lyrics of a made up song, but it made me cry so much. And as we can see that Murakami actually intended to use words and create this soundless melody in his writing. So I think we learned a lot from the lecture, but we still have a commentary from Casey. But before that, we would like to acknowledge some presence of professors from UP Diliman who are with us today. Ms. MX Jane Vinculado from UP Diliman College of Mass Communication, and of course, Ma'am Simel. Good afternoon po. And also to our international participants, good afternoon then, or good morning perhaps. So, ayun. Let's jump straight into the commentary. So, Kuya Renzo, please introduce Ma'am Casey.
Thank you, Raina. And introducing Dr. Casey Abalos-Orendain, or of course known to us students as Ma'am Casey. She is an assistant professor and the current chair of the Department of Philosophy in the University of the Philippines, Diliman. She finished her graduate and doctoral studies in Kobe University under the Monbuko Gakusho Scholarship, Japanese Government Scholarship in 2018. She returned to the University of the Philippines, Diliman, in that same year, where she currently teaches social-political philosophy, contemporary philosophy, as well as comparative and Japanese philosophy.
We will also be sending Ma'am Casey's publication titles in case you are interested in reading them after the event. So, ayan. Without any further ado, everyone, let us put our virtual hands together for our commentator, Ma'am Casey.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kazashi Sensei, thank you very much for that wonderful take on Murakami. I think that, like Raina, I never really thought of the moon in 1Q84 and all the other things that you've said before. And now that I think about it, it makes sense. The rhythm that Murakami uses in his works. But for my commentary, first of all, I just want to apologize because ahead of time, because my commentary will probably go off tangent every once in a while because I am such a big fan, and I needed to control that fangirl in me and concentrate on the themes that Kazashi Sensei introduced to us this afternoon. Um, so I became a fan of the author in 2001 when I read the translated version of the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. Since then, I devoured, next slide, please. Thank you. Since then, I devoured every translated work of his that I could find. And if you see this, I will just post some photos that you can, hopefully pleasant photos that you can look at. But this is a photo from the same angle that Kazashi Sensei gave earlier. And this is a photo I took on a really nice day from Kobe U. And if you can see, it's not just the Kobe Harbor that you can see, but across, it's also the Osaka Harbor. Anyway, since then, since 2001, I devoured every translated work of Murakami that I can find. And in 2012, when I had a choice of where to go for graduate school, I was lucky enough to choose among Tokyo, Osaka, and even cold Hokkaido. Yes, for those who are fans here, Hokkaido, where we can find the Dolphin Hotel in some of his works, like in Dance Dance Dance, Wild Sheep Chase. And no, I didn't find it there when I went to Hokkaido. The fictional Dolphin Hotel. Anyway, I chose Kobe because of his collection of short stories after the quake. I am grateful that I followed Murakami. Otherwise, I would not have met Kazashi Sensei. And so our topic for this afternoon, this connection between Kobe and Manila, it has a personal significance for me. Next slide, please, Kay. Thanks. As I said, after the quake, for me, signified Murakami's return to the notion of commitment. Commitment as the complete opposite of the detachment which characterize most of his early protagonists, such as in works like Dance, 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 or South of the Border, West of the Sun. Since most of his stories are told from the first person perspective, this gives the reader a very intimate look at how his characters, most likely how Murakami himself, felt detached from the world. Again, especially if we look at his early works, such as the Rat trilogy. And I know it doesn't sound nice, but the Rat trilogy, this began with, as Kazashi Sensei said, Hear the Wind Sing, Pinball, Wild Sheep Chase. Those are the trilogies. And then to a certain extent, the fourth novel, Dance, 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 because it still talks about the same themes. Anyway, so next slide, please. It reminds me, thank you, Kay. It reminds me of how Hannah Arendt opened her work, The Human Condition. Hannah Arendt stated that our reaction to the Russians releasing the first satellite, or Sputnik, is one of relief, and I quote this, relief about the step toward escape from men's imprisonment to the earth, end quote. She's saying that with the launch of the Sputnik, people were relieved because we were overjoyed that we can literally detach ourselves from the earth, from its gravitational pull, from all the worries and baggage that hold us back. So this detachment isn't just about, it's not just about escapism, right? It's not just about us in front of our TVs watching Netflix and just zoning out. It's not about that. It's not just a mere denial of everydayness. Rather, it refers to the desire to free ourselves from the earth, which is the very quintessence of the human condition. Okay, and this is what Hannah Arendt says. Now, to highlight this connection between Murakami and Hannah Arendt further, I have to mention his other work, Sputnik Sweetheart, if some of you are aware of that. I mean, it's in the title, right? A character in the novel, Sumire, disappears, as many of Murakami's characters often do. They disappear. She's unbound from this world. It doesn't matter if it's a physical world or a metaphysical world. As we can see, the theme of detachment is a recurring one in Murakami's career. Whether his characters decide to go or decide to go deep inside a dried up well, or if they go on a wild sheep chase, these are all just detachment. Okay, these are all instances of detachment. But what does it mean for this Japanese character to recommit? And by recommitting, I refer to him changing his trajectory and starting to discuss things that that are of social value. Okay, to return to, for example, his notions of what it means to be Japanese, what it means to be a citizen, what it means to be a writer, to have a voice, and to use that voice in a very significant way for his society. So what does it mean for this Japanese writer to recommit, to engage after a long detachment? Okay, next slide, please, Kate. So I believe that this is what Kazashi Sensei shared with us this afternoon. His lecture showed us the relationship between violence and commitment, between the space and time, right? With his discussion of Heidegger earlier in relation to Watsuji. Because whereas Heidegger talked about temporality, Watsuji talked about spatiality. And this concept of temporality and spatiality time and space, it gives us a very good context of where Murakami is coming from and how it affected his works. And I believe that we can see that, I will relate that later on to his recommitment in After the Quake. But anyway, to go back, Kazashi Sensei's lecture showed us the relationship between violence and commitment and how to recommit through writing. At first, we might think that this is a contradiction, violence and commitment, right? At the very least, we need to first clarify how it is connected. So on the one hand, when we encounter violence, the knee-jerk reaction is to turn away from it, to avoid it, because it's violence, it is pain. We relate it to pain. It is quite human for us to seek pleasure instead of pain. Some, well, I'm not sure about all of you, but for me, for example, and for some other people, we bury it so deep, pain and violence, until we forget the trauma, but then it still appears sometimes, you know, it still shows its ugly head, so to speak. In Murakami's world, this pain, at least this is coming from my own perspective, and please, if you have any comments on this, tell us later on during the Q&A. This pain usually comes in the inability, it comes in the form of an inability to maintain and hold on to relationships. And like in the group of friends in Colorless Tsukuru Tazaki, right? He lost his friends who are more colorful than him. So later on in the novel, he uses his interest in trains to reconnect with his friends. Anyway, that's just me being a geek for a while. So for those who cannot relate, you can start reading The Colorless Tsukuru Tazaki. Anyway, to get back to my point, once we face the truth after a jolt of violence, and this is what violence does, it's a harsh rendering of the truth. It really awakens us to the truth. We are then able to see fissures. We are forced to face the contradictions in our realities. That's what violence does, right? Maybe these contradictions are between norms and practices, the ideal versus the ideal, or the real, wants versus needs, what people do versus what people say. Next slide, please. Thank you. So once we open our eyes to these contradictions after these instances of violence, and then we are faced with a harsh truth, what do we do? Do we turn away from it again? Can we avert our eyes from it again? So this is just a picture of the garden in Kobe University where I usually read, or where sometimes our class would have barbecues or hanami. And the reason why I use it there is because we're talking about forms of life here. And I was going to say that when we turn away from the harsh truth, for social philosopher, for example, Rahel Yeagy, once we see these contradictions in our forms of life, we are motivated to criticize them. We are moved to change these circumstances. So from violence, okay, we face the harsh truth, and then we are motivated to criticize them because we cannot stand the violence. We cannot stand the pain. So hence, despite the surface nihilism or skepticism that we see in Murakami's protagonists, at first you might think that they're actually very stoic. We can observe that all of them, despite their stoicism, we can observe that all of them have a core belief system that remains even as they face the weirdest events. So once they become aware of the contradictions in their world, they cannot help but commit to the reality that they see because of these core moral stances. At least that's from my perspective. To put it simply, they as characters, or we as the readers, become more aware. And just like in Plato's cave, once you see beyond the shadows, you cannot return to the shackles that have been holding you back from the truth. Next, please, Kate. Thank you. So, the jolt of violence, right? To go back to After the Quake, as I said earlier, I believe that this collection of short stories is a recommitment by Murakami, a return to engage in his society, a return to engage in Japanese society, to be more specific, if you will. So in this work, he analyzed the 1995 Kobe earthquake, which was from the beautiful scenery that you saw a few slides earlier. This was 1995. This was what Kobe was shocked to see. Okay, and the whole of Japan, really. So people, I think that Murakami interpreted what happened in Japan this way. People were literally and figuratively shaken after the 1995 quake. And each story in the collection was a tremor, an aftershock that was still felt by each of the characters, even after the actual earthquake. This reverberation affected even those outside of Kobe because the short stories were actually set in Tokyo, in Ibaraki-ken, in Ibaraki Prefecture, and even in Bangkok. So this recommitment, this re-engagement was affirmed in Underground, um, which is, as Kazashi Sensei mentioned, it is even more strengthened, I think, because it is a non-fictional work. According to J. Rubin, um, one of Murakami's translators, I think he's my favorite Murakami translator. Murakami felt an earnest desire to learn more about this incident, about the Aum sarin attack in Tokyo. So this recommitment because of violence is, I think, something that Murakami uses again and again in his works, and even from his fiction to his non-fictional work, we can see how he was affected and thus recommits to his society. So I'm almost done. Maybe the reason why I'm almost done, but just let me just conclude quickly. Maybe the reason why we read his works is because these themes reverberate in us in the same way that in After the Quake, each character is affected by the earthquake. The Japanese aren't the gatekeepers of alienation and disenchantment after all, right? All of us feel this in one way or the other, even though, especially these days. So even though we may not always get the weird things that are happening to Murakami's characters, we don't see a super frog, or we don't always see a wild sheep man. Murakami, along with his translators, they are able to weave these narratives in a language that is easier for us to understand, in a language that we relate to. And just to emphasize and connect it to my class here, because after all, this is a philosophy 198 class on pop culture. Because Murakami is able to draw upon culture, both high and pop, he's able to universalize these themes even more. In 1Q84, for example, his character was able to travel between the real and the irreal through a piece of music, specifically the Sinfonietta by Leos Janacek. I'm not sure if I'm saying that properly. I was not familiar with this piece prior to reading the novel, but when I was reading it, I would listen to it over and over again until I finished the book. Next slide, please, Kay. Yes. So maybe the reason why we read his, so if I may just share, the very first time, I'm almost done, promise. The very first time I had to go up to Kobe University, climb up. Because as you can see, this is a very steep climb to go to Kobe, to Shindai. This is actually the last part, the most difficult part. But before that, it's like a 15-minute climb up. Okay. Because the campus is located in the mountain, and that's why you have to climb up. The very first time I arrived at Rokoeki, which is a train station, to go up before I go up to campus, I suddenly heard the Sinfonietta playing. This is the first time I have to go to university, my first week in Japan. I suddenly heard the Sinfonietta playing in the background, and I freaked out a bit. I'm going to be honest with you, because if you read 1Q84, the protagonist enters the netherworld, this weird world, while listening to Sinfonietta. And I freaked out. However, there was a bookstore in the station, and they were advertising 1Q84, and that's why they were playing the song over and over again. So I was not imagining it. It really was playing in the background. So they were playing this classical piece. So maybe I really did enter a different world. So with that, thank you everyone, and I hope that this escape, but at the same time this approach to reality, this thing that we're doing this afternoon, it's taking us to a different world wherein we can all share and appreciate our narratives, our tales. Thank you everyone, and let's start the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ma'am Casey. I think I'm speaking for many of us here in saying that the lectures, both from Ma'am Casey and Professor Kazashi, really gave Murakami's work a new light. And buti na lang, ma'am, you weren't transported to the other world. I was about to say that please say hi to the little people for us. It's kind of scary to actually be there, but that would be an experience. I think many of us will also be rereading and listening also to the music that are mentioned in Murakami's work this weekend. So, Kuya Renzo, please, let's start the Q&A.
Of course, moving on to the Q&A portion, please raise your hand or send in your questions in the Zoom chat. You can also send your questions privately to Q&A Gavin or Q&A Angel if you wish to speak anonymously.
For our participants who will be raising their hands, please feel free to correct us if we will be saying your name wrong. Please introduce yourself first before saying your question, and also please don't forget to indicate to whom you will be addressing the questions, if it's only for Professor Kazashi or Ma'am Casey or for both. So, ayan. Kuya Renzo?
If to give our participants time to think, let's open the question and answer portion with some questions taken from the sign-up sheet given to our attendees prior to this event.
So the first question is actually quite controversial, since it is asking about Murakami's misogyny. The question goes like this: one blog post claims Murakami's misogyny is an elephant in the room, citing that women in his novels are, quote, a sexy cure for loneliness, unquote, that there is an obsession with breasts, and that rape dreams are recurring elements in the novels. So the question is, I think it has two questions. First is, what's your take on how Murakami portrays women in his works and his controversially sexist way of writing them? And second is, a live question actually asked anonymously, is that if we women readers love Haruki Murakami's work so much, how do we justify his portrayal of women? I think it's addressed to both the speakers.
So shall I start?
Yes.
Dozo sensei.
Yeah.
ちょっと難しい。
Very quickly, and if I may, I'd like to try to expand on Casey has said wonderfully, and regarding narrative and And actually, it is related to the question. I think personally, on the since I'm a scholar, when I write articles, usually I'm expected to write something critical, about the topic. And regarding the literature, I tend to hesitate to go in a very critical sort of direction. Not because I do not have anything critical, but simply because I like to bring the creative works and artistic works under the positive light as possible, and in order to draw out the most important, significant possibilities. And the misogyny critique is a very well known one, right? Regarding Murakami. And I personally, this is being recorded, so it can be, it can be quite delicate. But regarding the question, to put it simply, I tend to take it not a question in terms of principle, but rather in terms of the novelist himself's sort of characteristics, the sort of reflection of his personal sort of sensibilities and the way he is living in the world, and the relationship with other person. So I think for anyone, I think we can find, something negative from a very universal principles. So, but on the other hand, I do understand why this kind of critique exists, and also to put it in a wider frame, I think it has to do with the nature of a narrative itself. And in addition to American writers like Raymond Chandler, I think you may know Dostoevsky, Russian novelist, is one of the writers he respects very much. And Dostoevsky's literary work is regarded as a polyphonic word. And Murakami Haruki talks about polyrealism. But I think some critics argued that in Murakami's world, there is not really a confrontation between the characters. And there are attempts to to be a pluralistic, but actually there is not enough sort of a polyphonic perspective. And this is related to the question itself, I think. To think of the world of Dostoevsky, we know a very attractive female and or male characters in Dostoevsky, and all very different characters and perspectives. And there's a confrontation between the characters, not only in personality, but also in the philosophical question itself. So I think this is related to what I wanted to mention in the last part, and briefly to put it. And can I just try to finish the sort of a general line? And and Casey mentioned, especially Kobe earthquake. And also Casey mentioned sarin gas poison attack case. But actually, the poison gas attack, I think, has a much difficult sort of a significance question posed for Murakami. And let me try to briefly, and Casey, I think she will share my PowerPoint slide after the talk. So you can go back to these slides later to look at carefully. So just briefly. So let me try to very, very quickly. The first story, here's the wind thing. Murakami said he had nothing to write about. But that's not true. We should not take it at the face value. And actually, he had something he wanted to talk about, write about, of course. And remember, the story itself is set in 1970. What kind of year is this, 1970? Immediately after the 1968, the World International Revolt. And especially in the case of Japan, and this is a photo very well familiar to Japanese. And this is a kind of protest carried out by students and people in the 1960 and 1970. So the people were against the peace treaty Japanese government concluded with the US, excluding the Soviet Union. So this was the post-war Japan started with a very one-sided peace treaty. And this was a very crucial problem still going on in Japan. And so people protested just like what's happening in Myanmar right now. And people, you may have an image of Japanese being very quiet and obedient, but it was not the case in this incident, as you can see. So Murakami Haruki entered the university 1968, and he was not involved in the protest so much, but he belongs to the so-called lost generation after this political upheaval, which failed, politically failed. So the young people had felt that they lost the sense of direction after these years. So this was a background for Hear the Wind Sing, for example, right? And just another similar point about the poison attack that happened 1995 in Tokyo. And it has a central sort of relationship with the question of a narrative and for Murakami Haruki. And this is a very bizarre group. The photo with the leader, Asahara Shoko, and the lower photo is a photo of the members engaged in a political election campaign, wearing a face mask, very funny, and they were serious. But they lost they presented a candidate for the national diet, but they lost politically. So they turned into a very violent sort of a campaign. And the end result was a 1995 Tokyo gas attack. And the problem is for Murakami Haruki, let me just read the second part regarding the narrative. Becoming a fast-growing cult group with the almost 15,000 members at its peak through various activities, advertisement and recruitment and all salvation plan. They claim to a supernatural power to levitate, for example, levitate, to float in the air. And you will find it bizarre, right? And claim to a supernatural power to cure people. And also its very bizarre, strange, syncretic doomsday doctrine. This was a narrative, which Murakami calls into question. And the question is, and actually, the Asahara Shoko, the leader, was a very dubious person, but there were many young, clever, promising young students who believed in his narrative of doomsday, narrative of supernatural powers. So the question for Murakami Haruki, why did so many promising young Japanese follow this kind of narrative? And Murakami Haruki felt that he failed in creating and presenting an own alternative narratives in which young Japanese could have faith. So, and this became a very serious central question. And for me, and just let me finish here, I think, and this has to do with the question of relationship with his father. So, and Casey highlighted the recommitment, but I think I'd like to emphasize the point that his decommitment is grounded in his unconscious entanglement with past and his relationship with his father. His father fought in China, and probably Murakami's father killed Chinese innocent people and soldiers. And this was not explicit, but young Murakami could sense it at his home because his father gave a silent prayer every morning before the breakfast. So I think this was it was a case of a hidden, latent concern coming up to the front, and where the Murakami's individual concern became intermingled with the historical unconscious communal questions. And that became a focal point because another violent incident happened in his own time, which was this Tokyo gas attack. Yeah. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking up some more time.
Thank you for that, Sensei. I think thank you for taking us to this deeper understanding of the underground sarin attack. But to go back to the question of Raina regarding the misogynistic undertones of Murakami's work, a lot of people will probably disagree with me on this. But first of all, he does not have a fascination for breasts. He actually likes ears. So if you're a fan of Murakami, you will realize that he actually talks about women's ears a lot. So not breasts, okay? Just at the outset, I just want to say that out there. And then second of all, I suppose you can see that from a very maybe Western gaze, individualist case, you can probably look at it that way, and I can understand why. However, if you look at his protagonists, the way his protagonists approach women, it's always at a distance. There's always a distance with it's almost as if his characters don't understand women. He doesn't know how to approach them. They don't know how to deal with them. They're always very mysterious. They're always very there's something otherworldly about women. So maybe if it's misogyny to think of women objectively in that sense, then I can see. But to say that it's misogynistic just because of his approach, I don't think it's that simple. In the same way that Tasashi Sensei says, whenever he argues about something, Murakami argues about something, it's not always that simplistic. So that's my take on that. Thank you, Raina.
Thank you, Mom. I didn't realize that he has a fascination with ears.
Ears.
And actually, it makes a lot of sense what Professor Kazashi shared with us, how the cult in 1Q84 and like the fascination with just supernatural things, and people gathering together under this narrative of savior and following these men with ideas of grandeur. I didn't know that there was historical background to what he wrote. There are a lot of questions that were sent anonymously, and the next question I think is from Percival Abril from UP Open University. Asked through chat, there's a book, The Hatred of Music by Pascal Quignard, which explores age-old associations between music and barbarity. It says that, quote, when music is applied to warlike ends, we tend to believe that it has been turned against its innocent nature, unquote. What is your view on this with respect to Murakami-san's perspective? I'll also be sending it sa chat din po so we can see the question. Ayan.
Yeah, briefly, I think not only for Murakami Haruki, but I think sort of ambiguous ambiguity of the musical appeal is a very critical aspect, as we know, to think of the Nazi eras, and also it was a case in Japan too during the wartime. So and the music can appeal to a very violent sort of a layer of a human unconscious. Is that true? And I think he is aware of it quite deeply, and because the let's return to the poster. I thank you very much again for a wonderful poster, and I think which has a sort of a image from the Kafka on the Shore, for example. And I think not only Kafka on the Shore, and we know that violent sort of behavior is a very central recurrent theme in his work, right? And actually, leaving aside sort of ethical judgment, these violent scenes and is making a musical effect on us readers, I guess, because think of some such scenes and the kind of sensation you may feel while reading them, and not only the the famous scene of killing cats, right? And so that's true. And also, I'd like to end my response by relating to his early young days. And the cat is a central theme, right? And actually, it also has the experience in his young years. And one of his most recent essay is entitled in Japanese, "To Throw Away Cat," to throw away a cat. And this was a traumatic experience for him. When he was young, and his father and Murakami went to throw away, abandon a cat on a shore in Kobe, near Kobe. So I think this has a very latent, unconscious sort of layer. And just let us remind the importance of one of the characters, Jay, and in his the early trilogies, and Jay is a bartender at Jay's bar, right? And Jay is supposed to be a Chinese. So, and in one of the essays, Murakami Haruki says that even today, he cannot eat Chinese dishes. And this is a very amazing thing, So I think even though in his early works, these themes, questions of war and violence are not explicit on the upfront, but I think it is really intimated in the way characters are set up. So I think, and regarding the ghost, I want to emphasize that it's not simply about the ghost, but the presence of the dead people, actually, what is important. So it's not about ghost, but the presence of the dead people, which is really significant. So to put it simply, I think it is a question of living together with the dead people. So this is a very contemporary question after the Kobe and the great earthquake of 2011 too. So, and also, let me close one more point. And not only the Ugetsu Monogatari, tales of the moon and the rain and moon, but think of the traditional theater, Japanese theater, no play. That is the same for no play too. And the main character, one type of main character is a dead person. For example, dead lover, dead priest, coming back to this world to trying to convey his emotion or thought to those who he or she cares still, even though they are dead. So I think not only Ugetsu Monogatari in Japanese literature and also in Chinese literature, I want to emphasize. So, and there's a very interesting layers of literary traditions in Murakami Haruki's work. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, sir.
Yeah.
I think I would also be re-watching the recording so I can learn more of the different layers that are present in his work.
Yeah.
This is I think many of us only read Murakami for entertainment before and how interesting his writing style is, but now we can see that much of the hybridity of culture can be seen in his works. The next question, I think, it is for Ma'am Casey. It is from Stephen Matthew Balane from Ateneo University. It goes like this. Given how Murakami writes about trauma, personal pain, and collective experiences, he writes about these in a light-hearted manner, like in Super Frog Saves Tokyo or in Nakata's own experience in Kafka on the Shore. How can this be explained given his writing style and beliefs? I'll also send this through the chat.
Thank you for that question, Stephen. It seems that way, right? It seems as if he's writing in a very light-hearted manner, but is it really light? So I'm going to answer the question this way. I don't think it's that light. The language seems that way, and this pertains to what Kazashi Sensei was telling us about the rhythm. The rhythm is well done, and I have to commend his translators that the rhythm is the same. The rhythm is somehow, I'm sure a lot will be lost in translation, and I wish I can just as a brief aside. In 2011, I actually wrote a letter. I emailed J. Rubin, one of Murakami's translators, because I really admired, because by that time I was able to sort of compare what Philip Gabriel, another one of his translators, and then J. Rubin, his other translator, what is their style in writing. And I realized that I prefer, or I um, I love to read J. Rubin's style, in the sense that, for example, he translated the Wind Up Bird Chronicle, and Wind Up Bird Chronicle is the book that I've read the most among all of Murakami's works, and I realized it's because of the translation. And I read somewhere that the translation, for example, for the Sheep Man, was very important, because in Japanese, the sheep man talked in a very weird way. So what they did in the English translation is that they didn't use spaces. So the Englishman would talk without spaces, without pauses, because when you read the Japanese original work, because in the Japanese written work, there are no spaces, right? It's all um, straight characters, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the lightheartedness that we read in Murakami, it's not it's very deceiving, because the rhythm that Kazashi Sensei was talking about is placed there in order for us to think that it's light. And then the words are very simple, because I suppose it's a very straightforward way of writing in a Japanese sense, and then the translators attempt to do it in the same way, to write it in a very simplistic, lighthearted way. But actually, the themes are not. So it is not, the writing style is there, but there's a tension between the simplicity of the writing style, the lightheartedness of the writing style, with the depth and the depth of the emotions and the thoughts that come into play. And I would argue that that's why we like to read Murakami, because we feel as if, or we think that it's deep, or even though we don't understand it probably, we think that there's more to it than what meets the eye, right? So I don't know if you guys would agree with me, but that's my take on this. Thank you for your question again.
I think I agree with ma'am, since I think I read my first Murakami book when I was only 17 or 18, and it felt like, wow, I'm so smart for understanding these weird things. Like, wow, it makes me feel like I'm cultured. But then now that I'm looking past, there's still so much to learn. And that's the beauty actually of reading him, because it's accessible, but it takes learning to actually see what's behind the books. Just a light-hearted question, maybe answer it in like 1 minute, 1 second lang or ganon. Is this, just to mix it up? Which Murakami book would you suggest for beginner Murakami readers? Just a quick answer po from both speakers. Which book would you recommend for a beginner Murakami reader. For Ma'am Casey, please.
Uh,
5,
while Sensei is
3.
asking, I would have to say not Norwegian wood, not Norwegian wood. But that's because it's I think that it's too lovey. So just in case that's what you like, maybe not Norwegian wood. I would start with Dance Dance Dance. That's me.
Professor Kazashi, your pick po.
Yeah, yeah. Regarding the Norwegian woods, I think some people say it is actually a very unexceptional work for Murakami's work.
I agree with you,
Well, yeah,
Sensei.
actually a very straightforward traditional romance. And so I think in that sense, I think other works can be much better. I think I would say like some other people, Kafka on the Shore. I think combining some of his characteristics in a very impressive way, and including the light-hearted and aspect, and which some of you might feel quite, too vulgar sometimes, right? And that's maybe one of the reasons why he cannot get a Nobel Prize. But I think he is, this is just a guess, but he is conscious about doing this. And he is trying to frank about the kind of life. And, I know the very harsh, I think, critique from a moral point of view, but I think he is a novelist. And as I said, and as I mentioned, he's trying to present the kind of world, at least he is living, and in a very frank way. And so it is not a very, strict normative escal stories, what we, so, and he's trying to, in that sense, I think very polyphonic, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, Ma'am Casey and Professor Kazashi. I will I will start reading Dance 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 this weekend and reread Kafka on the Shore afterwards.
Mhm.
Um, this is for both speakers. The question is there a connection or a relationship between the works of Murakami with the tragic events that happened in World War II, both in Japan and in Manila?
Oh,
For both speakers, sent anonymously.
yeah. I added the subtitle reading from Kobe and Manila, very simply because and both the Manila area and Kobe are the port areas, port cities, and I wanted to I wanted to hear the kind of sort of a take you have on his works from Manila. And but to be serious, to be more serious, I think not in terms of the Philippines, but let me repeat this point. And the relationship with his father is a very difficult one. And I think recently he made it clear that almost for 20 years, he did not see his father. And there were some reasons and hinted, but one is clearly the fact that his father fought in China, and probably, and his father had to kill Chinese people, and his father stayed silent, remained silent about this, but this silence was obvious in his home. And so this was a perpetual sort of a theme, latent and directly leading to his concern with the unconscious and history and violence. And I think that's what I can say as a sort of a third person, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, Sensei. I think in some of his works, he did mention a soldier, a minor character, a soldier who fought in the Philippines. I forget which novel this is, but um, even so, I think that his take on the Second World War is very much related to what Kazashi Sensei was saying. For example, he would talk about the Nanking massacre several times. Kafka ba yun? Yeah, okay, that's in Kafka. Thank you for that. But so there is some sort of connection. That's it. Thank you, Reina.
Yeah. Just a short addition, and actually it happened that his long sort of narratives dealing directly with violence and war began to appear, especially after 1995 and Kobe earthquake. But I think Murakami Haruki is made it clear that actually that kind of sort of concern with these themes was a long-standing one. And even before coming to Japan, when he was staying at Princeton in the US, he was doing research on the so-called Nomonhan sort of battle in China and the near Mongol, and which actually led to the World War II. So I think in that sense, there was a very, how do you say, very significant overlapping of his own individual, very almost unconscious concern and the major sort of a historical instance regarding violence and war coming together in his career and works. And but the question is, as a philosophy scholar, I think I feel sometimes he's expecting too much from narrative. And so as a person working in philosophy, I tend to think that there's something that cannot be put in terms of narratives, but only in the form of questions and or wonder. And so there's a sort of a very interesting tension field relationship with philosophical questioning and the narrative form of art. And this is what I wanted to go in my last part, but maybe for the later occasion. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Ma'am Casey and Professor Kazashi. So we're down to the last two questions. Unfortunately, we do not have enough time to accommodate all the pre-reg form questions and the live questions. So second to the last question is for Professor Kazashi. I think it's a clarification on slide 12, wherein the novelists bringing back the collective and individual unconscious without dissecting them. That part, the person is asking how that is dangerous. How would that be dangerous? And it would be nice to hear more on how the heart's darkness fits into this notion of the novelists bringing back the collective and individual unconscious without dissecting them and its dangers.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very difficult point. And actually, please go back after this session to my PowerPoint, and in which I included some quotes from his conversation with Jungian psychologist Kawai Hayao. And which is available in English translation, and where Murakami discusses this point. And but I cannot, represent Murakami Haruki, but this is what I understand, and as a matter of fact, I think personally, individually, and as a collective community, there are violent, unconscious layers in our world, internal world. And so I think what he's trying to do is to face this underground aspect at first and tackle with it as a fact at first, not really bringing in a usual sort of ethical framework. So that's the reason why it can be dangerous. I think he talks about this point. I think so, and also that is the reason why. Do you remember I mentioned the peace constitution of post-war Japan, and Murakami Haruki makes it clear that he is against just talking about pacifism without paying attention to this violent, unconscious dimension of human psyche. And also, not only individually, but also in terms of history. So I think what he's trying to do is to face and to describe, depict this violent sort of a reality of human nature, and which is presented in his fictions, right? To Kafka on the Shore, for example. So, and I think he's presenting presenting his narrative not as an answer, of course, but as a question. I think a question we have to think about, and so that's a reason. This question can be dangerous, I think. In other words, and actually, I often say philosophy can be dangerous in a similar sense. Yeah. Is this okay to end?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you for the answer po. I think there are no more questions. Since we are already over time, I think that would be the end of our question and answer portion, and it's a fitting end actually, since we are talking about how also philosophy can be dangerous, and with Professor Kazashi's answer. So, please, we implore our audience to have some patience still and bear with us until the end, because we would like to have a quick picture taking with everyone after the presentation of certificates for our speakers. So we will do our best to send the remaining questions to the speakers and deliver their answers afterwards. So let's continue on with the last leg of the event, which presentation of certificates.
Okay. For Professor Kazashi, this certificate is presented to Professor Emeritus Kazashi Nobuo for imparting his esteemed knowledge and expertise as lecturer during the special lecture on music, narrative, and violence, reading Haruki Murakami from Kobe and Manila, held online via Zoom on the 3rd of June, 2021.
Yay! Yeah.
Thank you very much. I deeply moved, and with not only with certificate, and this is the second time for me, and I hope I will continue getting it I will make a collection of certificates of the from the University of the Philippines. But also I'd like to express my really great thank you to not only Professor the KC Abalos-Orendain and all the teams, student teams, Raina and Renzo and others. And I'm really impressed with the organization and coordination of this session. And personally, I wanted to spend more time on the last part, narrative and question, Dostoevsky, in contrast to Murakami Haruki. Maybe if there's another occasion, and we can meet again. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ayan. I think the next slide is for Ma'am Casey. Kuya Renzo, please.
Okay. This certificate is presented to Assistant Professor Casey Abalos-Orendain for sharing her invaluable expertise and insights as a commentator during the special lecture on music, narrative, and violence, reading Haruki Murakami from Kobe and Manila, held online via Zoom on the 3rd of June, 2021.
Thanks, everyone. I would just like to thank Professor Kazashi for gracing us with his presence today and for sharing his work. And for the entire team, guys, good job. Seriously, good job. Thank you. I'm so proud of you.
Before we open their cameras for our picture taking again, we would like to thank everyone who attended, to our participants from Kobe, from Nanzan University, from Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University, and of course to our Vietnamese participants from University of Economics Ho Chi Minh, and from the Philippine universities. We thank you for your time, engagement, and enthusiasm. I'm quite shy to say the Japanese thank you because I don't know if I'll be able to say it right, but arigatou gozaimasu.
Yeah, arigatou gozaimasu.
Please open your cameras so we can have a quick picture taking. If you're comfortable with it. Ayan. Hi guys, thank you for staying with us until 3:30 p.m. and I think other time in other parts of the world. Sorry for our English if you can't understand us properly. So ayan. Arigatou gozaimasu. Let's take a picture. 1, 2, 3, smile. Ayan. I think someone is taking a picture. Ayan, I did a screenshot for panel 1 and then for panel 2. Ayan. Thank you very much. We're done with the picture taking. Again, thank you po for attending our small gathering and for staying with us until the end. Again, I am Reina Sebastian.
And I am Renzo Ramos.
And this has been on Music, Narrative, and Violence, reading Haruki Murakami from Kobe and Manila. We hope to see you again in future philosophical discussions. Goodbye po. Thank you po. Yeah, you can leave the Zoom na po. Thank you. Aside
Thanks,
po from
everyone.
the organizing team, I think Ma'am Casey requested for us to stay for a while.
Sensei,
Yeah, sure.
写真お願いします。
はい、はい。
Thank you po.
Oye-san? Oye-san, 大丈夫? Can you stay?
Yes, I'm here.
Yay. You will turn on your